A cornfield, reduce it to a mass of steel the size of a medicine ball. WISH weather girl Kay Field has addressed herself to that question, and here is her report.
Well, according to a United States Air Force meteorologist, the tornado is nature's most violent weather phenomenon. A small but extremely powerful force that concentrates its energy into a whirling funnel cloud with winds as high as 500 miles per hour. According to this source, thunderstorms must be present before conditions are such that tornadoes may occur. The extremely warm, moist air over Indiana yesterday had come up from the south and southwest. This was in collision with and overridden by a wall of colder air aloft moving down from the north. The collision of these two air systems caused the violent thunderstorm activity and subsequently the tornadoes. There may occur only small funnel clouds on the ground or aloft. These may all be moving together as a storm system, but the exact path a tornado will take cannot be determined with accuracy. They may move rapidly for a while, stop in one location, and even hop into the air to return to Earth at some other point. This accounts for the reports of undamaged houses next door to totally destroyed dwellings. This Air Force spokesman said that last night's thunderstorms in Indiana's central belt were the most perfectly suited tornado-spawning storms he had ever seen. The first tornado swept the Kuntz Lake area northeast of Knox in northern Indiana about 6 p.m., and about an hour later a second alighted down across central Indiana. Two huge areas were hit hardest. One was a 7-county area that included Montgomery, Boone, Hamilton, Howard, Grant, Wells, and Adams counties. The other, further north, included Stark, St. Joseph, Marshall, Elkhart, and LaGrange counties. The Elkhart County area was the hardest hit, and thus far has accounted for nearly 1/2 the confirmed deaths.
WISH News reporter Bill Aylward spent most of today in the air, and here are his observations.
Today I took my first helicopter ride. It ended about 3:30 this afternoon, and I saw things today that I've never seen before. This morning at 5 a.m., we met in the briefing room at Stout Field. Colonel Elrod, Chief of Staff, Indiana National Guard, told a group of pilots, observers, and state policemen that a search was to be made from the air and ground for survivors of the tornadoes that had crushed the state. The pilots were National Guardsmen who had been called from their beds in the early hours to help their fellow Hoosiers. Most of the men gathered there were called from their civilian jobs for the day. There wasn't any complaining. The briefing was swift. Assignments were made. I was assigned to the helicopter of Captain Jack Elsia, a veteran pilot and a career guardsman. We were to get to know each other quite well before the day was through. We took off to our assigned area of search, and I was soon able to take my first look at the results of the terrible force of the tornado. From the air, it was filled with a conglomeration of sights. These were the sights that no one really ever could get used to, the sight of nature in one of its most violent forms. My pilot told me that a tornado is a small, intense, low-pressure zone that lowers the pressure in a building until it collapses inwards with the violence of a bomb. He said that you're better off to leave your windows open to reduce the change in pressure. But somehow it was difficult to imagine that this sort of thing can actually happen here in Indiana. But Sunday night it had happened, and the terrible proof was spread as far as the eye could see. A belt of destruction had been cut through the pleasant farmlands and little towns. In a few moments, the town of Rocheville had almost ceased to exist. Towns like Marion and Shipshewana and Lebanon and Elkhart would never quite be the same again. Through the bubble front of the Army helicopter, the landscape looked unreal, almost as if it were a motion picture instead of central Indiana. The captain told me that if you stand with your back to the wind and extend your left arm, it will be pointing in the direction of a low-pressure area. He seemed to know a lot about the weather. I suppose that a veteran pilot should. We looked out through that bubble at Indiana. As we flew, we took these motion pictures. They only serve as an idea of the scenery then. You had to really be there to get the whole picture. While shooting these scenes, we also saw other things too fleeting to capture on film. There were farmhouses smashed to splinters, and the splinters blown for half a mile. Dead animals everywhere, with their frantic tracks standing out in the fields where they raced in circles as the tornado approached on Sunday. 200 chickens miraculously survived the holocaust and returned to their shattered hen house. There were stunned families trying desperately to find something left in the wreck of their homes. There was a view we caught of a couple removing clothes from their bedroom closet. The roof was torn from their house. We felt like snoopers. A kitchen window with the curtains still hanging and 3 walls gone. Big trees all over the area, uprooted and tossed like matchsticks. There was a refrigerator thrown 100 yards from the home in which it sat. A brand new automobile, flattened like a child's toy and resting on its top in the middle of a field. On the farm's feed silos, bent like cans, some shredded by the dreadful blow and resting a half a mile from the farm. There was a modern school, totally ruined. The school bus had been picked up and smashed against the only standing wall. There were traffic jams as far as the eyes could see, as the fortunate came to view the unfortunate. National Guardsmen guarding what little property was left in ruined homes and stores. There was mile upon mile of high-tension towers bent and smashed to the ground. There was a house standing untouched next to a shattered foundation. Everywhere, cows resting quietly where the tornado had torn a clump of trees to matchsticks just the night before. A golf course covered with wreckage, the carefully trimmed greens scarred with every imaginable kind of debris. Captain Alcia commented over the intercom, "My God, they'll never get that cleaned up." There were an industrious few who had recovered from the shock using plastic sheets to cover holes in the roofs and walls of their home. And there was an old couple who shaded their eyes to look up at us in the helicopter and then walk over what was left of their farmhouse. One house was picked up, turned around 45 degrees, and left with scarcely a scratch that you could see. It was strange the way the people on the street stood in small groups and just looked and looked and looked. And as we flew over the last search area for the last time, Captain Alcia turned to me and said, "You know, my heart goes out to those people, but I'm glad it wasn't my family." I guess he spoke for all of us. Indianapolis looked strangely orderly as we flew back to Stout Field after viewing scenes like these, with no wrecked homes or lives and neat, clean streets down there. After 6.5 hours in the air, it all seems strange somehow. This is Bill Aylward, WISH TV News, on duty with the Indiana National Guard.
While Bill was surveying the scene from the air, other WISH News reporters talked to the victims and the eyewitnesses on the ground. Reporter Stan Wood filed this next story from Greentown, Indiana, a small town just east of Kokomo.
The shocked look of disbelief on the faces of the people who have miraculously survived the total destruction of everything that they held dear in the way of material possessions. Their homes and property literally gone with the wind. We talked with a few of the lucky survivors of this tornado, and here in their own words, their feelings at the moment the tornado struck. Mr. Shuck, tell us exactly what happened when the tornado struck. Where were you? Were you home and were you listening to the warnings, or was it a surprise?
No, I didn't know anything about it. We'd been up to Lake Freeman, opened up the cottage, and when it hit, we hadn't been home 5 minutes.
Where were you and your family when the tornado struck your house?
Well, one of the daughters went to get a glass of water, and she saw the cloud out the back, and she screamed, and my wife looked up and saw it, and they came running down the hall. So we just picked the first door and went in this one bedroom. It's the only one that's standing.
That room that's standing back there is where you and your family managed to ride out the tornado.
That's right. It's the only one that's got 4 walls.
What sort of a sound did the storm make when it actually struck?
I don't know. We were so busy, and all I could hear was glass flying, and we stepped there and tried to get out of bed, but we couldn't, so I pulled the mattress over.
What is your name, sir?
William Bunky.
Where were you and your family in what's left of this house at the moment the tornado struck?
We were down in the crawl space of the house, underneath the house.
Had you had warning by radio or TV that a tornado was coming?
By TV, yes.
And you took immediate action. Do you think this saved your lives?
Yes, we was prepared when we heard it on TV. We got prepared.
Did you have any injuries in your family?
None whatsoever.
Were your neighbors as lucky as you were?
Not all of them, no.
Where were you when the tornado actually struck, Mr. Dancer?
Well, I'm not exactly sure. We were in the car, as our customary habit is. Whenever we hear of a tornado or one approaching, we usually pile in the car and move around, try to find where it's at by watching the lightning on the clouds. And we were about, I'd say, 1.5 miles south and watching this huge funnel. We thought it was a funnel. It looked like it was actually too wide to be a funnel. But we parked along the road for perhaps 30 seconds or more out there and watched it, and we proceeded on north toward the area of the damage. And as you come up over the hill on Sand Pike, the first thing we saw was a huge piece of a barn laying in the road. Then we proceeded on. We found wires hanging down our road, and as we got into the worst part of the damaged area, we saw roofs off of houses, and we heard people screaming and hollering, and so we couldn't proceed on any further down the road. Actually, we were terrified, afraid we might be in an aftermath of the thing or something. We were actually looking for a way out, but we seen there was no way out, so I parked my car and got my headlights on the houses that looked like they were worst, and proceeded through the mud trying to help the people get established and get them out in any ambulances or whatever might be available.
Have you actually helped any injured people yourself?
Yes, we helped a couple over there last night. They were all bloody. We tried to get them out of there, actually, but they were afraid to move their boy. He was in pretty bad shape, so we just left him alone and covered him up.
Well, how much warning did the people of this area actually have, and do you think that they took proper precautions in the face of an impending tornado?
I don't think they had a proper warning at all. We were expecting to hear Grant County mentioned on the weather reports, and it wasn't. So we had no indication that there was actually a tornado, except for the fact that we had one report that there was a tornado had just left Lafayette. And I told my wife it must be just about time for it to hit this area, because we were right in the path of it from the indications of where it was traveling.
I told you the PTA's coming tonight, George. I'm too busy for nonsense.
PTA, huh? Gonna serve your coffee?
You joke about my coffee again. You hear, Mrs. Olson? Like a broken record.
Well, as one committee member to another, maybe you should try Folger's coffee.
Why Folgers?
They blend it special. Folger's uses mountain-grown coffee.
Mountain grown?
Yeah, that's the richest kind. Bet your husband tastes the difference.
Mrs. Olson, I'll try Folgers on him tonight.
How about another cup, honey?
You second the my coffee?
Tastes kind of great tonight.
See? No trick to making coffee. All you need is a better coffee.
Folgers.
Try Folgers, the mountain-grown coffee. Mountain-grown for better flavor.
Just as the storm wreaked havoc with Hoosier homes, so did it knock out businesses and manufacturing plants. Chrysler officials were forced to suspend operations at the Kokomo transmission plant and the Kokomo die casting plant. Reporter Bob Glenn in the WISH mobile van recorded this report at Chrysler in Kokomo.
Today the skies over Kokomo are partly sunny, even blue in some spots. But 24 hours ago, here at the Chrysler Corporation plant in Kokomo, the skies were black. A tornado struck this section, known as Section 78 of the huge Chrysler Corporation span. This is where Chrysler manufactures parts for automatic transmissions. Last night when the tornado struck, 350 men were working in this plant. Fortunately, none were seriously injured and none killed. But first glance at the building tells you that the tornado really struck, and struck hard at this particular place. Where once brick walls stood, now just piles of debris and brick. The glass that was once in these window frames is completely gone. Men have been working ever since the disaster, cleaning up, sweeping up, trying to estimate damage. A group of Chrysler executives flew in early this morning to the Kokomo airport to view the damage, to estimate it. They've been walking through the plant all morning, worried looks on their faces. A tornado is a devastating thing, and you don't really realize how devastating until you visit the aftermath. Yesterday, these were shiny new automobiles. Today, they're covered with mud, demolished, windshield smashed, headlights gone. Nothing but rubble now. One car thrown with the force of the tornado on top of two others, mashing all three. Huge pieces of twisted steel from the rooftop of this once attractive building scattered all over the parking lot. Parts that are used in manufacture also scattered throughout the building and in the parking lot. The men who were working here last night when the tornado struck took shelter behind the huge machinery that's used in the production line. When you see men working on a cleanup job like this, it seems almost insurmountable. The huge pieces of twisted steel, aluminum, broken glass, scattered parts. All from the twister that struck here last night. And this is just one scene in a 6-state panorama where tornadoes, high winds struck, destroyed, and killed. All in all, the aftermath of a tornado is not a pretty sight. Huge trees, telephone poles, uprooted by the force of the tornadic winds. These are all parts that were to go into the manufacture of automobiles. Before they ever got into a new automobile, they're already in the junkyard. A huge trash can, battered like a small tin can with the force of the winds. These were packed for shipment before the tornado struck. But now tipped over like small egg crates. Wooden crates also scattered. Ironically, not as far as the metal. This is the scene at the Chrysler plant following the worst tornado in Indiana's history. This is Bob Glenn in Kokomo.
It's axiomatic that when disaster strikes, the Red Cross springs into action. The Red Cross based its statewide disaster operations in Indianapolis. Reporter Lee Giles has that story.
When there is a major tragedy, the emergency service organizations of a state and its communities take on a gigantic role. Police, firemen, civil defense workers, National Guard units, ham radio operators, doctors and nurses are always there for the help that is so vitally needed. And of course there is always much in evidence those two familiar organizations of aid, the American Red Cross and the Salvation Army. Both have done and are continuing to do a huge share of the disaster work. Here in Indianapolis, the Red Cross in particular has handled hundreds of calls from people throughout Indiana and the nation seeking news of their friends or relatives they fear may have been in the path of the tornadoes. Channel 8's Steve Peffley visited the Indianapolis Red Cross office late this afternoon to get the story of their emergency operations. He talked with the Red Cross's executive secretary, Virgil Shepard.
The big picture now in Red Cross assistance to victims of the tornadoes that struck Indiana is that of compiling an official list of the victims so that we can answer the hundreds and hundreds of telephone inquiries that have been coming in from all over the country from relatives and friends of victims and, of course, of non-victims. The Bell Telephone Company, for example, was able to put in a private long-distance line from the Indianapolis chapter to Kokomo, Red Cross, to Marion, to Lebanon, and to Noblesville. We do have a group of disaster specialists in from the National Red Cross out of Washington to begin the job of rehabilitation. Many of these victims will be unable to rebuild their own home, refurnish their own homes without monetary help, and the Red Cross will give that monetary help. This money, of course, coming from all the people of the United States, and particularly from the people of Indiana. So there's a big job ahead in rebuilding and refurnishing homes. We don't know at this time the extent of the damage. We're just now in the process of trying to find out all over the state how many homes were completely destroyed, how many homes had major and minor damage.
By the way, the Red Cross announced tonight that it will be open throughout the night to accept any emergency telephone calls. They also said that 66 more members of their national organization are due to arrive to help with the rehabilitation of disaster victims. They are expected to arrive from Washington, D.C. sometime tonight.
Bob Rockwell for your Pure Oil dealer. I'd like to show you how you can win cash, win gasoline by playing an easy new game. The name of the game? Play Pure. Here's how it works. Every time you stop in at your Pure Oil dealer, you get one of these cards. No purchase required. Each has 1, 2, or 3 letters on it, printed in invisible ink. To bring the lettering out, just wipe the card with ordinary chlorine bleach. When 2 cards spell P-U-R-E, you win $50. When 2 cards spell P-L-A-Y, you win $10. If the Firebird appears, you win 5 gallons of pure Firebird gasoline. So drive in now and get a free Play Pure card. Win cash, win gasoline. And while you're there, you may want to fire up with Firebird, the anti-wear gasoline that cuts engine wear and keeps power up. Stop in wherever you see the big blue Pure Oil sign.
So far, our report is focused on the wake of the storm in central Indiana, but in the northern part of the state, Elkhart County area was the hardest hit, accounting for nearly 1/2 of the confirmed deaths in the Hoosier State. Here is an earlier report filmed by cameramen of station WSBT, South Bend.
These are scenes near South Bend, Indiana, in the north-central portion of the state. Filmed by cameramen of WSBT. The torn homes, upended cars, and lacerated trees, the human and physical destruction could have happened almost anywhere yesterday. This is what is left of part of the little college town of Goshen, Indiana, east of South Bend. The experience here was more or less typical. There were tornado warnings, but there is no way of telling just where or when. There were dead and injured. Officials are still counting. The local hospital could not handle the crush, and the power was off in any case. Meeting halls, churches, a college dormitory, and gymnasium were pressed into service as evacuation centers. Grocery stores and department stores were suddenly open on Sunday to feed the hungry and clothe the cold. Wherever the tornadoes struck, and they seemed to strike everywhere, the death and destruction was over in an instant.
Cleanup operations continue in the 6 Midwestern states that were hit yesterday by 37 separate tornadoes. The death toll has reached at least 235. Indiana, the most heavily battered state, counted 128 dead, making this the worst disaster in its history. Ohio counted 53 dead, Michigan 44, Illinois 7, Wisconsin 3. Iowa escaped fatalities. The U.S. Weather Bureau said the twisters were as much as 1 mile wide in Indiana, 3 times the normal maximum width. The funnels derailed freight cars, rolled up blacktop roads, made rubble out of factories and homes. Nearly 400 homes were destroyed in Indiana alone. This is Richard Hickox reporting on behalf of WISH TV News and the entire staff of Channel 8. Good night.
This has been a WISH TV News Special, a report on the storm that stands as Indiana's worst in history. WISH TV wishes to acknowledge the cooperation of Roscoe Turner Aeronautical Corporation for providing transportation.
If this happened to your little girl, would you be as well prepared to treat a hurt as you are to sew on a button? You should be. And one of the things you should have is this, Band-Aid sheet.
That we're going to get guidance. The computer at this time tells us to roll heads down, which is the max lift position for the spacecraft. And then as we keep coming on down, the Cape, well, prior to this time, the Cape had computed the bank angle and a reverse bank angle time to use in case the computer or the guided reentry didn't work. And they'd passed up a bank angle of 45 degrees left to hold and a reverse bank angle time of